What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Adam Radulovic and from XL.net. And Adam, I will formally introduce you in a second. I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. I did one with Oren Klaff, which is interesting. He wrote Flip the Script and Pitch Anything. And it was when I did my intro with him, Adam, he challenged me on. It was really interesting. I tell people, watch the intro because he talks about some topics on status alignment. Okay. And so he definitely challenged me to, I think he was using what he does in the book, which is just making sure he had status alignment. So it was just fascinating. And I like his books and his content a lot. From the agency side, this is part of the top agency series. I had Jason Swank on. He built up an agency to over 8 figures, sold it, and now he's been buying up agencies. So it's interesting to hear his journey and what he did differently the second time around now. And Todd Taskey was interesting. He has the Second Bite podcast. He kind of pairs agencies to private equity and helps agencies sell. And sometimes he finds that people make more on the second bite than the first. And we're going to talk about acquisitions. There's upsides and then there's some downsides too, which you've experienced on the other end with XL.net. So we'll chat through that, but check out more episodes on InspiredInsider.com. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And how do we do that? We actually help you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the full strategy, accountability, and the full execution. So Adam, we call ourselves the magic L's that work in the background to make it look easy for the company and the host. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade than to profile the people and companies I most admire on this planet and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, you can go to rise25.com. That's actually how I met Adam through Rafi Arbel, who runs Market JD. And he's like, Adam is just a giver. And he said, when I got off the phone with him, I took 3 pages of notes and Rafi's like a really established business owner, seasoned entrepreneur. And he's like, I got off with Adam and I had pages of notes and there's so much I learned from him. I need to introduce you. I'm like,
that was very kind of him.
Done deal.
He really set the high now.
So let me formally introduce Adam. As I mentioned, he's founder of XL.net, amazing domain name. So if you want to buy it for like 10 million, he'll probably sell it. Maybe. No, not even. It only comes with this company. So, but he's the founder and president of XL.net. They're an outsourced IT department for small businesses. And their unique business alignment department and process basically helps companies remove technology issues. They apply technology to help XL that company's business goals. That's what they do. And he's also former director of Divine Parlano, which is a software company that broke down communication silos in Fortune 500 companies to optimize knowledge worker effectiveness. That company, Adam co-founded and was acquired by Microsoft in 2007. So Adam, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Honor to have you interview me for the podcast. And God, that bar that he set is pretty high. So I hope I can get halfway up.
I'm looking forward to it. I know our previous conversation, I also took a bunch of notes. So he was not lying. Start off talking about XL.net and what you do.
Sure. At a high level, we're an outsourced IT department for small, medium businesses. We tend to gravitate to the ones that are trying to change their business to accomplish something different or more. Typically that's growth, but not exclusively. And we see technology that in the past has been an obstacle for businesses. And my dream, my passion was to help other entrepreneurs remove those obstacles so they can achieve their goals. And technology just happened to be an area of expertise and an area that I knew was lacking, causing people to slow down their business. So that's what we focused on. We have a unique you already mentioned. We remove 80% of the problems from happening in the first place by a simple auditing approach and department that just focuses on looking for nonconformities and fixing them.
I promise you in this, I'm going to make Adam tell some breach stories. So stay tuned to some crazy stories, because I'm sure he's experienced, a lot of things that we probably never thought are possible. And it's probably scare me a little bit, but that's okay. Sometimes when that happens, we take action. What's interesting, Adam, is I feel like you've really honed in on who an ideal customer client is for you. And that's what it's allowed you to continue to grow and scale. Talk about that process and who is an ideal customer and how you've honed in on that.
Sure. Initially, it started more for what drove me and my passion, which after working with Fortune 500 companies, I knew that wasn't it. I wanted to work with organizations where families are part of it. You build relationships. It's more of a human experience instead of a transactional, bureaucratic, paper pushing, money making machine. And so from early days, we gravitated to organizations that had less than 250 employees, typically even less than 150, because you have this bond, this tribal experience when you work with those organizations. Now, there really wasn't rocket science how we got to narrowing the scope of exactly what we're looking for, except initially we just helped everybody. And through time, we understood, well, we really want to look for these type of organizations because we have the biggest impact. We drive the most value with them. So it's like peeling an onion, finding that and starting with just initially with the number of employees and the size of the organization.
So now when you think of that, and I like how you kind of break that down, which is there's a size, but then there's like who you have the biggest impact for and drive the most value for. Because when we were talking to you, there's specific industries and 24/7, that you serve certain pain points. So talk about some of those things that you have found you serve best for.
Sure. The core of it is an organization that depends on technology, that the employees there have to utilize technology in order for that business to operate. So that's our first really key requirement, because our unique and our value is really geared towards removing problems. If you can remove problems, somebody depends on technology, that productivity goes directly back and making that business just that much more efficient. So that's the key one. The other ones are more secondary. So we have a couple of secondary ones. The 24/7 that you mentioned, 24/7, 365. From the early days, I came from the investment banking world. I wanted to be able to offer that level of service. So initially, we came out as 24/7, 365. I had no idea how complicated that's going to be ultimately to manage 5 live shifts to deliver that service and account for PTO and sick days, et cetera, and still provide it. But that's another secondary. And our final secondary one is our security management. We went through a 5-year process to be certified by the International Standards Organization. It's called ISO 27001. And as far as we know, we're the only one in the greater Chicagoland area that's ISO 27001 certified, which just means that we're credible and audited, and our ability to manage security on us and on behalf of our clients.
Talk about customer support, right? You mentioned 24/7 shifts. How do you manage and how do you think about customer support in the company? Because I know companies, I go on their website, I can't even find an email address, right? Or a phone number. So how do you think about customer support?
Customer support is the number one experience for all of our clients. Ultimately, clients might initially, purchase or sign up with an IT firm because of price or some mentioned features, but the experience is predominantly based around how they're being supported. And our philosophy is, because we have that audit process that removes most of the problems, that by the time you get to our service desk, we already felt like we failed somewhere to prevent that problem in the first place. So if you do come to us, we want that experience to be white glove, perfect, as close to ideal as we can possibly get, because we already feel like we missed the mark preventing it. And so we have enough capacity in order to be able to handle the busy times, which you might be surprised, maybe not, but typically are Monday mornings and immediately after a holiday. So we have to be able to handle, after Thanksgiving, after New Year's, when people come back, sometimes of weeks of not working, all of a sudden they forgot their passwords. They don't know how to use an application because they haven't touched it in 2 weeks. We have a massive influx of issues, and be able to account for that and handle it. It takes a lot of planning. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, a 3-dimensional jigsaw puzzle to get that to work.
We'll talk about early on, because one of the things I know you said, if you were to go back early on, you would have spent more time on processes.
Yes.
Talk about the processes that you think about and put in place from the customer support end, and like the 5, you said the 5 live shifts.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you want to hear more about the processes we author on the behalf of our clients and supporting them, or our internal processes around running
More internal
service desk? Internal?
Yeah.
I'll tell you the journey. The journey was a really painful journey. And I hope anyone that listens to this avoids this painful journey. The first part of the pain is you need to start from day one. When you're the first person in the business, it's going to feel like a waste of time. And it's going to feel like you don't need to document these procedures because they're in your head. You know exactly how to do it. Well, the problem is, at some point, if you want to scale and add a second person, you're going to have to spend that time and teach them. And the written procedure, when you actually write it out, has a lot more steps than you realize just assumptively doing on your own. So I'd say first step is document it from day one. So we went through, and once we realized we need to start documenting these procedures, we built up a wiki, if anyone's even familiar with that term. We built up a wiki of all the procedures, and I wrote 70 or 80% of those procedures. Well, after a few hundred of those, you no longer as an individual have the time to go back and keep them updated. So what happened was, initially, as I was authoring, a couple of us were authoring those procedures, it took off, and ExcelNetter started looking at those procedures, and it really helped us move forward as a procedure and process-driven company, until we got to hundreds, and those procedures became old. And when people looked at them, they said, well, this procedure no longer matters. And instead of, from time to time having a procedure that doesn't matter, when more than half of them are antiquated, people gave up. They gave up on going to the wiki and even looking procedures. They just knew, oh, old procedures, I'm not going to look at that. And so we had to tear it all down and start back up again. And we used a particular tool that made it easier than a wiki. But our first step was training 100% of ExcelNetters to be able to themselves author governance, author policies, procedures, and processes. I'm sure there's an approval process that's built in, so it's not that anyone writes it and so I'm automatically in production, but 100% of ExcelNetters at that point were trained in writing procedures, and today 100% of ExcelNetters write procedures. So when we launched it, we trained everybody, and then we just pulled in policies, got people comfortable using the system and authoring policies, because everything starts with the policies. And then we pushed that down to develop our procedures. And the first place we looked was the wikis. We go to our, at that point, it's probably 1,500 to 2,000 different wiki articles. And we just one by one would take and freshen them so it's relevant today and move it.
Did you use a certain software to move them onto a platform from the wiki?
Yeah. We use a product called Sweet Process. Mm-hmm. There's other ones.
We use Sweet Process. We love it.
You do?
Yeah, I've had Owen on the podcast before. He's awesome.
I agree.
His stuff is great.
Sweet Process is just an amazing, easy to use platform. So you're probably smiling as I'm going through the description. Today, we have probably about 3,000 pieces of governance that are written, but it sounds overwhelming. It's not, because it's departmentalized. So every department has there's a very few number of procedure or policies they have to focus on, and more procedures. And we've developed this quarterly process where every department goes through and reviews as a team all of their policies, processes, and procedures. And what's happening now is that we're more pruning what we put in place, and not many new procedures. And I know this is a long-winded answer to your question, but we're not developing many procedures anymore. Very few. What we're doing now is refining what we have in place.
Talk about the shifts. How do you coordinate it with different time zones, people? Where are the people located for the shifts? And because I'm sure you spend a lot of time organizing that.
Sure. When I initially thought of 24/7, I thought of 3 shifts. What you miss with 3 shifts is, what about vacations? What about weekends? And how many shifts are weekends? Right, you have 48 hours in a weekend. So you have to have this floating shift as well that covers a little before, a little after weekends. So we have a floating shift from Thursday to Tuesday that has weekend coverage. And then we have Excel letters that work on the weekends, multiple different shifts. Regular business hours and how it flows between shifts is always an overlap. There's never a hard cut where this shift ends at, let's say, 5, another one starts at 5. You have to have at least an hour or two cut over between the two, so you can hand off between them. And it took a lot of trial and error to get to where we're at today. We had a lot of issues, and customers would have challenges at those times that we couldn't help. We had to really start shifting the shifts in a way that PTO wouldn't impact it and surprise sick days wouldn't impact it. So there's no shift that we are just accounting on one person. The next level got more complex. Is great. That's service desk and that's regular support. But what about escalations? What about management? So we had to start building these layers of escalations across shifts and supervision and management across shifts as well to get to where we're at today.
So to cover all this, what are, when you think of regions or countries that because obviously,
countries,
I mean,
yes.
you could have US, but people, it's harder if they're working in the middle of the night.
Yeah. It's really hard to find people that are willing to work 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. in the US that are qualified. Very tough. So we have 3 different countries that we operate in today. US is for the regular business hours shifts predominantly. And then Serbia and Philippines for the other shifts. And what we're trying to match is that people, for the most part, are working in their daylight hours.
Do you still have family or friends? Do you have friends or family in Serbia?
Yes, I still have family in Serbia. So you can't tell, but you might not be able to tell. English is my second language, and I do still have family in Serbia. Came in US in 1988.
So with sourcing talent from Serbia, is that people you knew, or did you just have to go about like anyone else from scratch, not knowing anyone?
Unfortunately, the latter. I really had to go and look because I was gone for so long. None of the people that I was friends with really ended in the technology field, and so I had to go like anyone else. But I had a advantage. I speak the language, and I could ask around, and people are more willing and probably trusting to work with somebody with a name that's clearly Serbian, and that I think made it easier to get everything started there.
So, your background, were you born here, or when did your parents come over here?
Sure. I was born in Ithaca, New York. My dad was a professor of thermodynamics. And then when I was a year and a half, I think my parents wanted both my brother and I to get a Serbian upbringing, to experience what they experienced. And so we went back to then Yugoslavia before the war. So went back to Yugoslavia and then returned to Provo, Utah in 88. And
How long were you there in Yugoslavia?
About nine and a half years.
What was it like there at the time?
Really different than now. It's the community aspect was not something that I've experienced in the US since, right? I think the communism or socialism, whatever it was called at that time, really did make everybody feel like they're on the same level and you could be friends with anybody. You have the knock on the door and somebody wants to borrow an egg or some sugar. You knew everybody's names, and it was so for me, it was very warm socially to be part of it. At that point, it was a clean country. Capitalism didn't enter in yet either, so it was very government controlled. My fondest memories were from vacations. So you're probably familiar with the European vacations of August. So we'd go the full month of August on the Adriatic coast, and I'd spend a month on the beach.
It's interesting, Adam, when on the surface with your background, your dad's a professor of thermodynamics. You studied computer engineering at Michigan. I'm thinking, oh, professor, not necessarily like entrepreneur, right? But when you look at, I know you've shared in the past things like you would charge people to take their garbage out. You had a shaved ice business. You had multiple businesses throughout your life. Was that just inborn, or were your parents kind of pushing you to explore delivering value in the way of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, my parents didn't push me in anything in life. My parents just kind of loved me and helped me wherever I needed help. So it was all driven by me. And if I have to go back and think through, I believe it was just getting to America. I went from a socialist, communist country, whatever you want to call it, to America, and all of a sudden, money was something that was important. And then where I came from, it just wasn't. It didn't enter into conversations. What was important was science and engineering and community. That's what people focused on. And I came here and I was inundated with just commercials and lotteries. And I remember I saw, what was it? Some lottery comes in the mail. You won $1 million, and I was so excited. I went to my parents.
The sweepstakes or whatever it was.
Some sweepstakes, yeah. And I was so excited. Look, we won $1 million. And somewhere around there, that I think in my head, it triggered that I want to run a business. I want this freedom of running my own business, and I want to be able to buy candy. Like, that's where it originally started as a kid. I want to be able to buy my own candy. And so I figured out how to make money just doing that.
We were, before we hit record, talking about red ocean.
Yeah.
Talk about the red ocean for a second.
So the concept of red ocean is any industry that's just full of competition. And I think the phraseology comes from a red ocean when sharks are just feeding on bodies, and the bodies in this instance are just businesses that seem to offer the same exact service as everybody else. There's a lot of blood in the water, and you have to take clients from each other. There's no green field, nowhere new to go. And then the opposite, I think, is blue ocean, where more of your challenge is describing what you're offering, your value proposition, because nobody's looking for it. You have to go and evangelize the value that you're providing. I think both have pros and cons, but we're in a very mature red ocean right now.
So then how do you differentiate and get past that?
It's hard. It's really hard. I'll give you an example. So we absolutely have uniques in the market, and our core unique, this audit process, that we have a separate department that performs the audits and fixes nonconformities and reduces 80% of the problems that happen with clients. Well, how do you convey that to a prospect? Well, you can do what I'm doing. You can verbally describe it. But what prevents your competitors from just saying the same thing? Nothing. So this journey that's been happening over the last 14 years, we were built this way from the get-go. From day one, we wanted this service to reduce problems, to audit, to remove obstacles for the entrepreneurs and business owners and small business employees. And that was the passion. That's what we want to do. So we built it, and initially it was proactive. It was proactive IT. And then competitors would start saying, hey, we're proactive too. And we're proactive because, well, we have monitoring in place. Well, that's like saying a fire alarm is being proactive. No, it's not being proactive. You're just reacting faster. Nothing. You're not stopping the fire. You're just saying, oh, look, there's a fire over there. So we had to go through this education process saying, well, monitoring is not proactive.
Talk about some of the misconceptions. So like,
yeah,
monitoring is not proactive. What are some of the other misconceptions of statements?
Sure. That just setting technology up correctly once, even the right way, is being proactive. All right, we came in and we migrated you now to Office 365, and we set all the security features correctly. Great. The minute you stop, the minute you're complete, new technology can change and cause that previously correctly set up system to no longer be correctly set up. So there's this constant work of going back on technology and seeing how it's set up and making changes to prevent problems from happening. The second misconception is the one I hit initially, is the monitoring. That monitoring and looking for problems after they happen is being proactive. Absolutely necessary. You want your technology provider to detect the problems before employees have to fully experience it. But that's still not preventing. You're still experiencing that problem. And as quickly as you can resolve it, that negative experience is still pushed down to that organization. So those are, I think, probably the two key misconceptions that I see around being proactive. I think the misconceptions that IT providers themselves have around being proactive is they imagine they can have their service desk, their firefighters be the ones that prevent problems, to be the preventers, fire preventers. And that's just not possible. You can't have someone that's geared and focused on preventing, stopping fighting fires, be the one to also think about being proactive and stopping fires. I know you can't do it. We've tried it. You just get geared one way or another. And I have my story of how we discovered this is we hired service desk Excel netters in the early days, and we found the best ones we could, paid them really well, and we said, all right, they're not going to want to deal with all these annoying problems of just recurring over and over. They're going to follow this process, and they're going to remove them from happening in the first place. And we made a really simple checklist, 19 items. Hey, service desk person, please just follow these 19-step items per client. And if we do this, our problems will drastically reduce. And time went by, and our level of issues stayed. It was about one issue every 3 or 4 weeks per employee. And finally, I sat down. I'm like, hey, Excel netter on the service desk. I'm going to not use the name. Why do we still have these issues? Like, I think we have the process to reduce them, but I'm seeing the same issue repeating. Like, Adam, why don't you sit down next to him? I'm like, okay, sat down next to him. All right, let's get this list out. Step 1. All right, I got to do this check. Client. Oh, hold on, Adam. There's a call. Oh, okay, John. Let me help you with your laptop. 1 second, Adam. 50 minutes go by. Okay, where were we again? Which client? Okay, let me pull that back up. And this just happened through the day. I'm like, okay, I got it. I'm the idiot. I'm sorry. You could have just told me. I get it. So I think that's the misconception that IT providers have, that they can overload an existing role and ask them to do this proactive task is just not possible.
Yeah, I like how they handle that.
I do too.
Yeah.
It's very effective.
What are some of the biggest mistakes companies make? You've seen, I mean, we'll talk about some breach stories, but what do you see as you go through a lot of audit processes? What are some of the big ones for people?
Going through the selection process of picking a new IT provider. And we walk 5 to 10 companies on how to do this once a week. I think the majority of people get it wrong. They don't know what questions to ask, what attributes to look for in an IT provider, and most importantly, they don't know what end result they want with an IT provider. What do you want from an IT provider? Well, the number one reason I hear is faster support. But you don't want faster support. You want there not to be the reason to get support in the first place. You want not to have problems. That's the reason. And it's now the market's trained. We get everybody because of the level of service, slow support. They do things, wrong. But really, the underlying problem is they lack process, and they lack a way to remove problems from happening. They lack an audit.
It makes me
get these new providers, and they get the same result, and they're frustrated again. So I see sometimes people go through 3-4 providers in 5 years, and their challenges. We are more like our audit process. It costs. There's more labor. A separate department goes into audit the environment. Costs more, but that's what has the biggest bang for the buck if they're dependent on technology. If I can remove 80% of problems happening in that business, I know they'll be able to accomplish more as a business, but they're going to have to marginally invest a little bit more for that to happen.
So they're asking the question, how fast is your support?
Yeah.
So what questions should they be asking them?
How will our technology experience be different with you than what it is today with provider X? And then after the how tell us why it'll be different. And hopefully the answer for the why is a proof of some process and evidence of achieving that result.
It makes me think of those. I don't know if they're still airing those commercials. And I remember seeing the Maytag repair person commercials where they show them basically relaxing and doing nothing because the equipment was made well and that person doesn't get called. Right. That's kind of what I picture.
That is spot on. I wish I thought of it. Yes, what you said.
We need to do a spoof commercial with just Excel.net, except with, mimicking the Maytag one. So talk about, now that people make, there's mistakes that companies are making with their security. What are some of the stories, some of those breach stories? I know you've spoken all over the place, and I'd love for you to share a few.
I'll share probably my scariest one that I have. It was a large organization. We got pulled in by I'm trying to remember. I think it was by a forensics company. And they said, hey, we have a client. They're middle of breach. Their internal IT is understandably a little lost, right? Because they're on one hand feeling guilty because a breach happened, and on the other hand, they're trying to deal with this scenario that they've never dealt with before, not prepared. So forensic company asked us to come in, and we came in, and we just started talking with the C-suite, understanding the pain they're currently experiencing first. And they're in the middle of doing this major transaction, and all they needed was access to some files. It's been now, I think, 10 business days where they haven't had access to these files for this. And it was a significant transaction, the biggest in their history. And through a couple of questions, we identified that they had backups. Not only just backups, they had offsites of those backups. And they had really an industry-leading platform for disaster recovery. And all we had to do was log in, and within an hour, just click a button. It's almost as easy as like the red button, staple red button. It's that easy. We hit that button, and within an hour, the C-suite was able to access their files. Right. So that part was, all right, great, cool. We're able to fix something, and The C-suite was impressed, but we told them, like, no, your IT did a great job. They put this in place. For some reason, they forgot it was there. They just need to hit the button. We hit the button. A few weeks later, we're still helping them, recover. A few weeks later, we started having the people that were part of this breach response team, they started receiving emails. And they started receiving emails from the assumed hackers, the threat actor. And what the emails had was, there were individual emails. So, hey, Mr. Attorney or Mr. Forensic Expert, we know where you live. Here's a picture of your home. We know the car that you drive. Here's what it is. Get your client to pay or else. Now, I don't know why we didn't receive emails like that. Maybe we got involved a little bit later than everybody else, but it clearly escalated the game to a level that we've never experienced before, where I felt at risk. And from then on, I realized that even during these breaches, the only way we can communicate is through anonymous email services. That it can't be known that we're helping organizations. The Excel.net name can't be out there that we're helping these organizations. That's probably scariest.
So how did they get resolved?
It was a bluff. So the hackers were not paid. The systems were recovered from, with clicking that red button. And the IT ultimately, we helped them and they got organized and they were fine. We left them. We had to make a couple of changes. One, which I'm sure everyone's tired of hearing, but the way the hackers got in was the lack of multi-factor authentication, their email platform. So that's the other button we hit. We asked the C-suite, give us permission. We're just going to enforce this multi-factor on everybody right now and just stop the bleed. And sure, there's going to be some negative operational impact, but at that point, they were past that being the big issue. So we hit the second button, and now that they had that hole fixed. That was it. We hit two buttons.
I'd love for you to talk about tech stack for a second.
Okay.
What you like. You mentioned Suite Process. What are some other software tools either you use internally with the company or externally?
Sure. You want me at like the marketing tech stack?
Yeah.
Stack? Sure. Well, let's start with a couple on the sales side that I think I'm most comfortable with speaking because we did a lot of research. Our CRM, antiquated, but we're in Salesforce. We selected Salesforce and we're using it from day one because of their integrations at that time with almost every other system that could be integrated with CRM. And it's still true today that Salesforce.com is more integrated than any CRM platform out there. I think HubSpot is a really good second. And if we had to reselect a CRM today, it'd probably be HubSpot. The second tool is for our salespeople and customer service that allows us to dial through relatively quickly on either clients or prospects when we're seeking some kind of information. That tool's Phone Burner. It really makes it pretty easy to manage that process for small, medium business. Prior to that, we had another provider, InsideSales.com, that I think just swam up and said, we only want large organizations, and started cutting out small, medium businesses. So we looked at every single offering on the market. And there's not that many. At that time, there was about 13, and we selected Phone Burner.
It was Ring Central in the running?
At that point, it was not able to do dynamic lists for dialing. I think that killed out most competition, the ability to have these dynamic lists, which is really required if you have more than one person dialing. Right, so they don't clobber each other and dial the same person twice in 5 minutes. Those are probably the key ones on the sales side. One that goes between sales and marketing, Apollo IO, great for a database of contacts and emails of who to prospect to. Their competitor, ZoomInfo, I just didn't have a good experience working with their salespeople. I felt like they were just in it for themselves and they know how to sell stuff and they really didn't care about me, which I just completely realized when the salesperson told me they weren't willing to do something because they'd get the small commission check. It was just, changing the payment schedule. Okay, well, I got it. So we went to Apollo. For retargeting, we use ad roll. So retargeting is when someone either comes through your sales process or visits your website, some way you've already engaged with them once. Retargeting allows you to continue to engage with that prospect, and typically through ads or marketing or emails. SEMrush, to analyze the performance of search engine optimization. So to see when people search in Google, why they're coming to you and how your competitors are doing, and even your clients. We frequently use it with clients that are just curious about their own SEO performance and working with marketing agencies. We show them how to use SEMrush so they're equipped to be able to speak the same language and see the results themselves. I'm probably missing a couple. Those are the fresh ones that come off the top.
Those are good ones. What do you use? Do you use internal communication with the team? Do you use Slack or anything like that, or no?
So if you go back to my introduction, the company, and we co-founded, it was a group of 8 of us. We put together that organization. Microsoft bought it. It's part of Microsoft Teams. Nothing bad to say on Microsoft Teams, except that user interface for group collaboration and group communication, they just didn't do a good job. Very inefficient screen real estate. So we use Slack, and we have a significant number of bots, integrations, some that are third party, some that we had developed ourselves. So it serves as a hub and spoke communication platform for us. So everything goes into Slack from all the other systems and can come from Slack outward.
Talk about running a SaaS company versus what you run now. Because it seems like I would think, oh, Adam's going to go off and start another SaaS company and sell it.
Yeah.
Instead, he wanted to make it hard on himself and get a lot of people.
Yeah, my background was software development before, and I loved creating technology. I moved over to this world because I more enjoyed people than I did technology. And professional services is a people business, whether it's the Excel netters and just getting the joy of watching their careers grow, or clients where you're seeing their dreams start getting realized and their breath of fresh air when they don't have to worry about technology anymore. I just like that really belly to belly human experience.
Talk about the hiring process. All this is a very people driven business. And like you mentioned, there's 5 shifts, and that's just one part. That's only customer service, not everyone else. Like you mentioned, the managers and the escalation team. So what is and they're interacting when someone's maybe mad, right? I mean, you're not getting calls like, thanks, Adam, we appreciate you. Like, you're only getting calls most of the time, like, something's hitting the fan, we can't find something, not that's even your fault. But how do you hire? What's your process for hiring?
Sure. So hiring process, our philosophy is that we're trying to help. It's a 2-way street. We're trying to help select people to become Excel netters and be able to predict that they're going to be successful and happy in that role. Our process is geared really towards that mutual bond being successful. So outside of the standard, behavioral interviews and whatever interview questions we go through, we have some additional assessments that help us. We have a personality profiling tool that we use called Culture Index. It's not a pass or fail type system. It just tells us that for this role, these are the type of personalities that are going to fit the best and have the highest chance of succeeding. So we look for that. That's one of the things we look for. And we also do cognitive tests that we know for a certain role, certain type of cognitive skills are necessary to succeed with. And we use Test Gorilla for that. We used Wonderlic previously, but they did similar move to InsideSales.com and unfortunately drastically changed their pricing and how they treated small, medium businesses. And we said, okay, I see we're not in your market anymore. We'll find something else. So those are the two that we use in including our interviews. I think the unique part in the interviews that we have is the final step before anyone joins ExcelNet. There's a team interview. And the purpose of this team interview is, let's say you're in the service desk. 100% of the service desk gets invited to the team interview, as well as the prospect. And both are told the same thing. We want to make sure that as a team, you'd enjoy being part of this team. And if you don't feel like you would, this is your chance, like, bow out and say, either I'm not interested in joining ExcelNet, I see the team, I don't think it'd work well, or for everyone on the team that joins the interview to be able to say, I don't think that I'd work well with that person. It's complete ability to buy in and choose who's part of your team instead of that being chosen for you. I'd say those are
Great.
Are magical pieces that help us to.
Thanks for sharing that. You mentioned Tuscarora and you had Wonderlic and it got purchased and it wasn't the greatest experience. That also happened with another provider that you had. And so you help a consulting company, and something similar happened in that scenario.
Yeah. We're in a red ocean. I think I mentioned we're in the very mature red ocean. So what happens in red ocean? All you can do is take clients from each other and merge and acquire. So we had one of our competitors get acquired. Actually, had a number of our competitors get acquired by the same entity. And we got a call or inbound marketing lead and started talking to this consulting company. And they said, Adam, the company we were with previous to acquisition, it was a great service. And I knew that company, and I echo that. Like one of our competitors that I felt was the best in terms of service and culture, and just loved that organization. He said, we were with that organization that you knew, Adam. Its service went from A to F, and it's been that way for months. And now it's been longer than months. This has been a year and a half. The same company is kind of experiencing this, but said, okay, we went through the conversations, and I think we both recognized they were looking for exactly what we do because we're so similar to who they were with previous to that acquisition, that they ended up, becoming a partner of ours and really returning back to what they had. Almost the impossible scenario. They got back what they had previously. Now, my hope, and if the entities that I might hear it, I love you. My hope is the service is even better than what they had previously. And certainly we're aspiring for that. But they've gotten back what they lost. And now they're able to focus again on their business instead of being frustrated and having the C-suite worry about IT issues.
Adam, first of all, I want to be the first one to thank you. Thanks for sharing your journey, your lessons. And I've taken several pages of notes here and just sharing everything.
Was it more or less than 3 pages?
Let's see. 1, 2.
I promise a page and a
3.
half.
It's 4 right now. Yeah, it's 4 pages. No, 5. Sorry, it's 5 pages. You won't be able to see on my iPad, but it actually
that is a lot.
Is 5 pages here. But I want to encourage people to go to xl.net to learn more and check out what they're working on and everything they do. And Adam, just thank you for sharing.
Thank you for having me here.
Everyone.
Take care.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I feel like $100 grand.